there beautiful people, welcome to the very first video on Crafty Uncovers. On this channel we will be looking at true crime stories, ghost stories, mysteries, the origins of urban legends. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, please hit that subscribe button and let's get started. In the spring of 2010, a man called Elias Abdul began a series of vicious attacks that terrorized 3 states and left 5 men dead. These attacks earned him the names the Genesee County Slasher and the Genesee County Stabber. By day, Elias worked as a clerk at Kingwater Market in Beecher, Michigan. He would spend his time bagging groceries and swapping pleasantries with locals who knew him as Eli. However, by night he was living an entirely different lifestyle. He was approaching men with a small frame and either asking them for directions or help with a broken down car. Then he would pull out a knife, plunge it into his victim, and speed away. The first of his victims was David Dwayne Motley. David was aged 31 and he was found dead around 6 a.m. on the 24th of May in Flint, Michigan. He was lying face down on the ground with multiple stab wounds. Unfortunately, this was at a time when violent crimes were prevalent in the city. The Flint Journal reported that there had been over 100 assaults with weapons in that month alone. This must have made things very difficult for the police at the time. On the 21st of June, police responded to calls of a man down at 3 a.m. Emmanuel Abdul Muhammad, aged 59, was transferred to Hurley Medical Center, but tragically he died of his wounds. Although 2 murders had now occurred, it seems that killing his victims was not Abdul's main objective. On the 26th of June, a 42-year-old man was approached and stabbed at around 5:50 a.m. This time the man survived the attack. Then again on the 12th of July, Antoine Jackson, aged 29, was found stabbed at 1:30 a.m. He too survived. On the 19th of July, Richard Brooker, aged 49, was stabbed. He was asked for help to get a man's car hood open. He said, "I'm beating on his hood, trying to get it open. He takes a Bowie knife and sticks it right in my kidney and liver. Then he grabbed me around the neck." Booker showed reporters an 18-inch scar that extended from his chest to his pelvic area, and a small scar on his right side. He said that he had lost 8 pints of blood. "He's a stone-cold killer," he said. "He knows what he's doing. He's trained in it. He knows where to stick you to kill you." Booker later told ABC News that it took 68 staples to his back and stomach to close the wounds, and that he has slash wounds to his arms, as you can see in the pictures, because he tried to prevent his assailant from cutting off his face. "I've never hurt so much in my life, never come so close to death," Booker said. "I was about dead." On the 23rd of July, a 21-year-old man was stabbed. He too managed to survive. However, on the 26th of July, Darwin Marshall, aged 43, died after being found stabbed at around 1:30 in the morning. The police had no suspects or motive to share with the public. Whatever the reason behind these horrendous attacks, the frequency increased. It was as if the assailant needed to act quickly. On the very next day, the 27th of July, Antoine Marshall, aged 26, was stabbed around 3 a.m. Luckily, he survived. And then again on the 28th of July, a 19-year-old man was stabbed at around 3:30 a.m. On the 30th of July, the next man to fall victim to Abdul's knife was Frank Kellybrew. Frank, aged 60, was found dead around 6 a.m. after a passerby called the police about a body lying in front of an Italia Gardens restaurant. Police believe he was killed sometime between 3:20 a.m. and 6 a.m. Another man was also stabbed on the 30th of July around 6 a.m. He was 28, and luckily he survived his attack. On the 1st of August, a 17-year-old man named Etwan Wilson was stabbed at around 2:30 a.m. You can see the length of his scar in this. It's horrendous. On the 2nd of August, Arnold Minor, aged 49, was stabbed to death at around 2:30 a.m. Minor was on his way home from his mother's when he was stabbed to death less than a mile from home. On the 5th of August, several different occurrences happened. Firstly, Elias Abuelazam was actually arrested at 1:15 a.m. for not obeying a traffic signal. He was taken into custody for a few hours after the stop. Found in his vehicle were a knife and a hammer. Abuelazam was wanted on a simple assault charge from 2008 out of Leesburg, Virginia. He was booked and a magistrate released him on personal bond. The knife and hammer were returned to him on release. After being released, Abuelazam decided to strike again, this time stabbing a 67-year-old man from Leesburg around 6 a.m. Fortunately, this attack did not end up with another death. Also on the 5th of August, the press had informed the public that the police believed they were looking for a serial killer. On the 6th of August, a man from Leesburg was struck on the head with a hammer. And then on the 7th of August, a 59-year-old janitor was stabbed outside a church at around 7:45 a.m. It's believed he was having his cigarette break and he was just attacked. On the 11th of August, an anonymous tip was phoned into Michigan State Police tip line. Now, this was one of about 500 tips. However, this led them to the Kingwater Market. When the police arrived, they spoke with employees and they looked through videotape which helped them to see that Elias fitted the description of the assailant. However, they found out he had not been seen in work since August the 2nd, just before Minor had been attacked, and that he had told people he was off to Virginia. The attacks in Virginia had started the very next day. The police spoke with Abuelazam's family and discovered that his uncle had paid $3,000 on a ticket for him to Tel Aviv. It turns out that on this day he had flown from Detroit to Louisville, Kentucky, and then on to Atlanta, where he was due to board a plane for Israel. Thanks to the information from his uncle, Border Patrol were able to page him over the intercom in the airport, and there he was arrested in his shorts and flip-flops. He was originally charged with attempted murder on Antoine Marshall on July the 27th that had put the victim in hospital for a week. Over the next few days he was extradited to Michigan and imprisoned awaiting trial. His attorney requested bail of $10 million, but the judge made the decision that he was not to be granted bail of any value. He was to stay locked up. On the 20th of September, Arnold Minor's blood was discovered in Abuelazam's vehicle. For the first time since he was arrested, he was charged with murder. The trial began on May the 8th, 2012. The prosecutor's key piece of evidence was Arnold Minor's blood, which was found on a pair of pants in Abuelazam's luggage. A week later, on May the 15th, the prosecution rested after calling 50 witnesses, including other victims and their relatives, several forensic experts, and Abuelazam's uncle, who I mentioned earlier. 2 days later, on the 17th of May, Abuelazam's attorneys presented an insanity defense. Their sole witness was a psychiatrist hired by attorneys who diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia and said Abuelazam had told him he committed the crimes because of evil spirits. The doctor also said Abuelazam had told him he had attempted suicide in 1997 and was diagnosed as psychotic by an Israeli psychologist in 2009. The prosecution responded by attacking the psychiatrist's credibility, noting that his field of expertise was drug and alcohol treatment. The next day, the prosecution refuted the psychiatrist's diagnosis with two of their own mental health experts. These psychologists agreed that although Abuelazam had an unspecified personality disorder and he lacked empathy, his attacks were too planned out and organised for him to be considered legally sane. On May the 22nd, 2012, after only 1 hour of deliberation, the jury found Abuelazam guilty of Minor's murder. On June 25th, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Now, I was totally confused with this, as there were other charges, but there were no other convictions. However, his other charges have currently been suspended and will only be taken further if his first murder conviction is overturned by an appeal. The reasons for this is that the additional trials would end up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. But people convicted of first-degree murder in Michigan are automatically entitled to an appeal. Abdul hired a new attorney, Christopher M. Smith, who filed an appeal based on the original trial judge's rejection of a motion for a change of venue due to the extensive media coverage of the case, which they claimed wrongly called him a serial killer and refuted the judge's decision to allow evidence of the other attacks or testimony of his other alleged victims. On June the 10th, 2014, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Abdul's conviction. Smith then appealed that decision to the Michigan Supreme Court, which declined to hear it on November 25th, 2014. Ilis Abdul is currently serving life imprisonment without parole at Gus Harrison Correction Facility in Michigan. One of the things I found really frustrating about this case was that there was no known motive. The only thing that's ever been reported was that he was controlled by demons or the devil, but yet he's not legally insane. So is that actually a justification? I can only imagine the frustration that the families must go through or must still be going through, because there's no reason that their family members were killed. It's very frustrating. It feels unfinished, unanswered, because nobody knows. That was the case of the Genesee County serial slasher. I hope you've enjoyed listening as much as you can, obviously, in these kind of situations. And I hope you've remembered to drop a sub for the channel so you don't miss my next story. If you have any cases you'd like me to look into, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, my lovelies, be careful and look after each other.